What's up guys, and welcome to this second video in a series of early game strategy videos I'm doing on the major powers of Global War 1936. This one is going to be focusing on the Soviet Union. So first off, we're going to have a chat about tech that I like to get as the Soviets, and then we'll talk about some early game moves that I like to do. Next we're going to go on and have a quick little chat about the CCP, and then end it up with the Spanish Civil War and the Spanish Republicans. Remember guys, these are all my opinions, and if you have any agreements or disagreements or just thoughts in general, feel free to shoot me a comment. I'd love to hear it. Alright, let's go. Alright, let's talk about some Soviet tech here. Same deal as last time. I'm going to talk about the first round of techs that I'd like to get in the game, and the second round of techs, and then everything else kind of on a case-by-case basis. I'm going to be discussing the Soviet tech under the assumption that we have about 4 tech rolls per round, whether that be upgrading the factory in Stalingrad to a major or signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. I assume that the Soviets will usually have about 4 tech rolls per turn. So, starting with advanced artillery here, we're going to put this in the first tier, one of the first techs I like to get in the game, simply because I really like artillery for defense, because it's kind of slow, so I like it better defending, and it has good counterattack potential while you're defending. And for an eventual Soviet offensive, having that artillery is going to be good. And also Katyusha rocket artillery is very, very good. Up next, mechanized infantry. I'm going another first tier here, just because I really love the value that advanced mechanized infantry provides. They defend at a 5, they attack at a 4, and they only cost 4. So I really find that advanced mechanized is one of the most cost-effective units in the entire game. Heavy armor, we're going tier 2, simply because it's a very good unit, but it's expensive, so you're not going to be buying a ton of them until later on in the game. Same deal with jet fighters. They're a very good unit. They pack a punch, but they're expensive, and you're not going to be buying a ton of them, so they can wait a little bit. Heavy bombers and strategic rockets always kind of go hand in hand. Obviously, as the Soviets, you want to get them both eventually for that victory point, technological superiority. I prefer heavy bombers just because it's my personal preference. I think they pack a little bit more of a punch, and they're a little more versatile. But obviously strategic rockets are a very good unit, so if you want those or you like them better, go ahead and do them first. I'm going to put either way. One of them goes in the first tier, one of them goes in the second tier, just because you need them both and you want to get working on them early because they're kind of tough technologies to get. Up next, long-range aircraft. This one I'm saving for the second tier because it's a very good tech, and the Soviets have a lot of ground to cover. You need it for that victory point, but it's not an urgent need for the early game. I really do like to get out advanced artillery and advanced mechs before long-range aircraft. And obviously we got to start working on heavy bombers or strategic rockets a little bit earlier because they're tough techs to get. So I'm putting long-range aircraft in the second tier because it's a very good tech. You need it, but it's not as urgent as some of the others. Advanced subs, I like to put in the third tier because if the Soviets are doing really well and the Axis isn't doing super well, I find that advanced subs are a very good tool to use against the Allies in the late game. So it's going to be obviously one of the last techs you're going to get in the game if you even get them. But advanced subs can be used to great effect against the Allies if you need to. Advanced anti-sub warfare. The Soviets don't have any convoy lines except for the Arctic line, but you can't really defend that one, so you don't need advanced sub warfare, advanced anti-sub warfare. Up next is radar. Again, you don't have convoy lines, you don't really need it. If you like to have unlimited scramble and the buffed interception, then go ahead and get it, but I wouldn't get it before the first 8 techs. That would be a third tier tech for me. Up next is wartime economy. Obviously, best tech in the game, free money. Next up, improved factories. I'm putting in the tier 3 along with advanced subs. depending on what's going on, you usually don't need improved factories. The Soviets start with a ton of factory production on that front line with the Germans, so you're probably going to be fine without improved factories. So generally, if you're having a real good game, I like to do improved construction along with the advanced subs, so you can start getting out a ton of advanced subs in the in-game against the allies to try to limit their offensives against you. But really, it's up to you. If you want improved factories, go for it. Obviously, probably don't need heavy battleships, heavy carriers, or attack transports. The Soviets aren't really a naval power. All right, let's move on to some Soviet early game moves. Okay, let's talk about some Soviet early game moves and strategies. Now, obviously, we're only making $8 a turn, so you're not going to be doing a ton in the early game. The Soviets have a really, really slow start, so there's not much to talk about here. As the Soviets, one of the first things I like to do is upgrade the Stalingrad factory into a major. So you can achieve that on the second turn. On your first turn, you can send $4 to the Spanish. And then on your second turn, you'll have 6 plus 4 left over for $4 to the Spanish, and then 6 to upgrade that factory. If the Allies ask you to donate to Abyssinia, I don't like to, unless they offer me something really, really good. Because my main priority is always getting that factory up to get that extra tech roll, because the tech in this game is, I think, very, very good. So if the Allies offer you something like that you can't say no to, then go ahead. Lend-lease to Abyssinia in that first turn, but I prefer to just send $4 to the Spanish and save up for a round 2 upgrade of that Stalingrad factory. I wouldn't worry about bolstering your front line in the early game. The Germans got a lot to do before they get to you, so you're going to have plenty of time to get your defense set up. What I like to do in the early game is I don't like the Molotov-Ribbentrop pack simply because it feels like the Germans get a little bit more out of it. They get more money, and they get to use the White Sea-Baltic Canal up here to get their subs out. And it feels like the extra tech roll I'd rather just upgrade the factory in Stalingrad to get that 4th tech roll, and 5 feels like a little bit too much for what the Russians need during the game. I think 4 tech rolls is a good place to be at. I like to attack the entirety of Finland in the early game as well. It makes you stop in Karhala, which I don't like. I prefer to go from Karhala all the way and take over the entirety of Finland, because that's good money and it gets you those victory points. Right once July of 1939 hits, I like to do a full-on offensive into Finland, because I leave my German border pretty empty. Now, obviously, depending on what they do, if the Germans really look like they're going to come after you, obviously don't go after Finland so hard. Protect your border. I think that should go without saying, but given a normal, typical game where Germany's worried about Poland and France first, you've got time to do what you want to do and then set up your defense on the German border. So I like to go after Finland first. Eventually you'll need the Baltic states, but I do kind of like to let Germany handle that. And then towards the ending of the game, hopefully you're doing well enough to get them back. So I like to do Finland, and then also, obviously, I think a pretty popular one is going to be Iran here. You're going to have plenty of planes. I think you should build 1 or 2 more planes in the early game once you have the money. Obviously, you're not going to be swimming in money, but I do like to buy an extra plane, an extra tactical bomber. So you can use your airborne infantry, some planes, and some cavalry and a couple infantry to take Iran out. It doesn't take a huge force. And then obviously leave some guys in southern Iran for the rest of the game to defend against late game Allied attacks. Just throughout the game, keep bolstering it up, throw a couple militia in there. And you should, unless the Allies really want it, you should be good to go with southern Iran. And then also in the late game, I don't enjoy going after Turkey. They're kind of a tough nut to crack as the Soviets. You've got other stuff to do. They're pretty well set up for their defense. So to get your ice-free port, instead of going after Istanbul, in the very, very late game, the last couple of turns, Kuwait is a good target right here. Go through Iraq, that's another victory point, and then try to take Kuwait. I find that to be pretty effective to get that ice-free port. Usually the UK doesn't have Kuwait defended at all. So in that very, very late game, that's a good way to get that ice-free port. And finally, the last target for an early game attack is going to be Mongolia. I think this one is pretty popular as well. The only downside of Mongolia is, depending on how your Chinese campaign is doing, it really kind of opens you up in the later game. It's a lot more territory for you to have to defend for only $2. Depending on how well we're doing, sometimes I'll wait till a very late game and try to get Mongolia, leave them neutral for most of the game. If Japan is being a beast and going heavy ground forces in China, maybe hold off on the Mongolian campaign until later on to see kind of how stuff is going. But if it seems open and it seems pretty safe, go for it in your first round of July 1939 attacks. You'll be able to spare the men for all 3 attacks: Iran, Finland, and Mongolia. I've never had a problem with that. And then it's pretty easy to get your guys back to the front line and defend them using your rail movement and all that factory production you have on the front line. In the early game on the Japanese border, the border clashes aren't really a very good idea, because you're going to be attacking like crap and the defender always has the advantage in them. So I don't like to engage in border clashes. You can send a fighter on there if you really want, but I think they're best used elsewhere. I just like to slowly build up on this border using militia and our Novosibirsk factory. You can get 1 guy out there per turn pretty easily. Other than that, just kind of hold. Late game, you can try to invade Manchuria if you want, but that really is a late game move. I would not recommend doing that early on in the game. You've got bigger things to worry about. In terms of this fleet over here, there's really not the best thing to do with them. I do like to bring them around into the Baltic Sea before 1939 if you want to. I also like to leave the sub out there in case I need it later on. You can convoy the Japanese with it, you can convoy the Americans with it in the very late game. It depends. Really, it's just kind of whatever you want to do with it. There isn't a best strategy for those guys, I don't think. And that's about all there is for a Soviet early game. Just in 1939, probably attack Finland, Iran, and maybe Mongolia if you want to. I'm going to make some more videos about like medium to late game strategy. So I'm just talking about the early game right now. The Soviets don't have a ton to do. So when you're setting up your defense, I'm going to talk about that in a later video. It's a little bit more nuanced, and there are a couple different things you can do. So that's going to have its own video. But yeah, Soviet early game is you just kind of sit back and relax. You don't do much. All right, let's move on to the CCP. Early game CCP. This one's kind of a tough nut. I don't like to spend money on an influence roll in the first turn, because if the KMT really wants to, they can bring everything they've got up north and probably take you out on that second turn unless you bolster a little bit. So I like to wait 1 turn, don't spend any money on their first turn, and see what the KMT does. If they bulk up in Szechwan for an attack to try to take you out early, on that second turn with your $4, drop them out in infantry to protect, and it's going to be a tough fight depending on how the Chinese roll. You'll probably survive that with the extra mountain in there. So on my first turn, I take my influence roll for the northern warlords there, but only at the 1. I don't pay to boost it to see what they do. And if the KMT doesn't come after you on that second turn, then sure, spend $1 to try to influence on your second turn. And, buy an infantry or a militia, just, depending on what you want. Probably militia would be my guess. And yeah, just kind of hang out and make sure you don't die. Keep an eye on the KMT if they start, bulking up on one of your borders. Make sure to drop a couple mountain infantry and some militia in there. If you've got the money, every couple turns, drop a dude or two in there, and just get lucky. That's my best advice for you. Just get lucky. If you hit that first roll, then you're really in business. And the CCP can become a beast if the KMT lets them, in the Japanese. All right, Spanish Republicans. Your first couple turns in the Civil War are going to be a little bit tough. You're going to be on the back foot, at least at the beginning. My best advice is to send in a mountain infantry every turn from the Soviets. Just $4 a turn, one mountain infantry every turn, because they defended a 5 in those mountains. So they're going to be really, really good for your defense. If you start to turn the tide, maybe an artillery or two, but you've got the 2 planes. If you can keep those guys alive, then you're going to be fine with just the mountain infantry in there every turn. Because they're going to be attacking you to 2. You're going to have your planes in there behind them doing most of the damage. And then the mountain infantry obviously defended to 5, so they're awesome. So really what you're probably going to lose Asturias on your first turn, so you're going to be sitting with Catalonia, Valencia, and Madrid. You got to keep Catalonia because that's the only place that you can get those mountain infantry in from. You need this major port here. You can't send in a mountain infantry into Valencia because you don't have a major facility to do so. So obviously if you lose Catalonia, you're just going to have to send in normal infantry or militia. You're probably really on the back foot at that point. Make sure Madrid doesn't fall, and just watch the Nationals very carefully. If they leave their plane open to a counterattack, do it. Send everything you got and try to kill that plane. Unless he's sending a ton of planes in there, which means the Germans aren't going to be doing well in other parts of the war. So it's good if the Germans are sending more planes in the Spanish Civil War. I'd say the odds are always going to be in the Nationalists' favor in the Spanish Civil War, just because they've got 2 Lund-Leasers instead of Euro 1. So really make it difficult for them. Send a mountain infantry in every time. It's going to make their lives a lot harder. Try to pick off their plane if they leave it underdefended. Keeping Madrid is good, but it's not the end-all be-all. You don't have to keep Madrid to win the Civil War. Catalonia is a good place to have planes because you can scramble your fighter out of it. I honestly think Catalonia is the most important territory to hold for the Republicans, because that's where you're going to be getting your mountain infantry from, and you can really beef that place up and make it a beast. And then other than that, just get lucky on your rolls. Hit some of your recruitment rolls. That's my best advice, is hit those rolls, because those really, really help you out. So yeah, good luck.